All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us this evening. We're here to talk about a very important aspect of our city, which is housing and affordable housing. But I'm going to start by attempting to actually put you to sleep, and I'm going to quote a CMHC report, which I know is everybody's favorite thing to read. And I quote, "The Federal Housing Action Program was announced by the Minister of State for Urban Affairs. The overall objective of the program was to tackle a number of important housing problems facing Canadians. 1, insufficient production of moderately priced housing. 2, affordability problems faced by prospective homeowners. 3, excessive demand for higher priced housing. And 4, lack of incentives for construction of rental accommodation." And as for the affordability part of the report, it says, "Increasing construction costs compounded by increased interest rates have placed home ownership beyond the reach of many families." So this sounds quite relevant, right? The title of this report is Evaluation of the Federal Housing Action Program from 1976 to 77. Published in 1978. So clearly, we've been spinning our wheels for quite some time, almost 50 years, it seems. All right, and we're here tonight to hopefully hear what plans we have for Hamilton and housing moving forward. We're looking for new ideas. First, let's introduce ourselves. So my name is Kevin White. I am a volunteer with Habitat for Humanity Hamilton. I serve as the Vice Chair of the Board of Directors, and with me is Tricia Lewis. She is the Director of Operations with Kiwanis Homes. Our organizations are part of a conglomerate called the Hamilton is Home Coalition. We are a number of not-for-profit and registered charities which operate within the city of Hamilton. We advocate for funding, for new housing policies, and for affordable housing in general. Our organization has approximately 11,535 housing units, mostly within the city of Hamilton. And the partnerships that we have with our clients are long-lasting. So the partner families that we have and the partner individuals that we have who we work with, those relationships are long-lasting relationships. So a quick shout out to the organizations that helped put this together tonight. So Indwell, we're in Indwell's building tonight. And a quick shout out to Bill and Michelle. I'm not sure where you are, but the Indwell residents who helped actually put everything together tonight. So thank you very much. Kiwanis Homes, the YWCA, Victoria Park Community Housing, Sacagawea Nonprofit Housing, Good Shepherd Nonprofit Homes, Habitat for Humanity Hamilton, and we had external input from Wesley Urban Ministries. On that, I also do want to give a shout out, I'm not sure if she is here or not, to Councillor Nam. Is she here yet? Back there? I will wait a second. There she is, great timing. So Councillor Nam put our organization together back in 2019, so she had the foresight, the leadership, and the initiative to actually understand that we are better together rather than competing with one another. We can get more done that way. So thank you, Councillor. Much appreciated. So the reason we're here tonight, Hamilton is now ranked the 3rd least affordable city in North America. 3rd least affordable in North America. And that's according to the Oxford Economics and Haver Analytics study that was recently done. We need to build more housing, and we need affordable housing to ensure that we can retain talent, we can attract talent, we can give people an opportunity to raise a family here, and we can give those who need help a place, a roof over their heads so they're not left out in the cold. Now, with that said, we have to be realistic with our expectations. We're not going to solve everything tonight. We're going to hear a lot of good ideas, but we're not going to solve the issue. There are a lot of contributing factors to the housing crisis, including a labor shortage, supply chain issues, land scarcity and speculation, long approval processes, NIMBYism, high government fees. We have no master housing plan in the city of Hamilton, believe it or not, and archaic housing and zoning policies which are more in tune with the 1950s than they are with the 2020s. We are still very far behind on housing in Hamilton. So we're looking to see how can we change that. So let's get started. Each candidate is going to have 2 minutes to introduce themselves, They're each going to have 3 minutes to answer the questions. Every candidate will have an opportunity to answer every question. And I ask that everybody please be respectful of the candidates. We're all here voluntarily. We're all here to collaborate. We're all here to listen to new ideas to how we can actually solve this crisis together. So with that, we're going to start with Andrea Horvath.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. How's everybody doing tonight? Good. I wanted to say thank you first and foremost to Indwell and to Hamilton is Home for putting on this discussion, this fireside chat tonight. What I wanted to say in my way of introduction is just to let you folks know that housing, particularly affordable housing, but housing has been a passion of mine for a very long time. Before I was even in elected politics at all. I was working in a not-for-profit housing provider in Niagara Falls. I sat on the Hamilton Housing Authority, which was the housing provider, the government one, that existed before City Housing Hamilton. I got elected to City Council. I served on the City Housing Hamilton Board. I sat on the Housing Health Center Board. The first bill I introduced in the legislature when I got elected provincially was about rent control for housing, for tenants and particularly vulnerable tenants. And so what I want you to know about me is housing has been a lifelong passion for me. Affordable housing has been a lifelong passion for me. And I know that just as Kevin was saying, there has been little progress on housing. I know that there are solutions. Some of them are being actually implemented by the very organizations that organize this event tonight. Some of them are going to take the action of the city as well as partnerships with providers and with other orders of government. And I know that I have not only the knowledge but the experience to actually move some of the yardsticks when it comes to housing. Housing is the place from which everything else stems. You have to have safe, affordable, appropriate housing to be able to build a good life. And we can do that here in the City of Hamilton. Together, we can absolutely do that.
Good evening, everybody. Okay, there we go. My name is Keenan Loomis, and I just want to be able to see the folks behind the pillar. How are you? You probably know that I was the former CEO and president of the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce. You probably know as well that I am the candidate that presents the biggest opportunity for generational change in this community. But what you probably don't know is that I have experienced housing precarity myself. Many of you may have seen a video of my wife talking about how we came to Hamilton, how I lost my job in 2009 in Washington, D.C., and had to come home to Canada and to be in my in-laws' basement for a year, and which at the age of 35 with 2 small kids is kind of the low point of my career for sure. And I was really happy and lucky to have the opportunity to stay with my in-laws for almost a year as I got my feet on the ground here. And you know, much luckier than so many people in this community. But that wasn't my first experience with precarity as well. Being a child of a single mother when I grew up, I know what it is like to move time and time again and to be a paycheck away from being out on the streets. And so it's because of that, that experience, it's because of what I've seen since the pandemic has happened. It's because of being a parent in this community that I have announced a plan to build 50,000 new homes in Hamilton over the next 10 years. Today we announced a plan to dedicate 1,000 of those per year to be affordable and supportive housing as well. And I want to be the housing mayor, and that's exactly what we need. We can talk about plans, and we'll talk about a lot of details tonight. A lot of those were things that you wrote, and I appreciate that, but what we need is a doer, and we need a mayor who makes this absolutely a priority. Thank you.
That's how good it works. My name is Bob Ritina. I'm running for mayor again. I was the mayor from 2010 to 14. I grew up in this neighborhood. I lived on 39 Regina Avenue, and I went to Ballard and Delta. And when we went to the show, we went past Paul's Driftwood Tavern here to the Windsor Theater next door. When I got on city council, we had a publication, a report on housing in Hamilton. It was called Keys to the Home. And there was a paragraph in that report that said the federal government is not living up to its responsibilities with regard to off-reserve Aboriginal housing. So I made a motion to council that we send a letter pointing this out to the new government, which was the Harper government in 2006. We got a reply from the Prime Minister's office within a year and a half, and I'm not taking the credit for this, but I'm telling you a true string of events. The federal government put $80 million into off-reserve Aboriginal housing in the province of Ontario, and $5 million came to Hamilton. And the First Nations housing group bought the Windsor Theatre. Unfortunately, they had a bad engineering situation, and thank goodness for Indwell, who came along and helped them to complete that project, and there it sits. And I've been delighted to be a part of, in my old neighborhood, this old tavern turning into the John Perkins Center. And then right across the street, yet another one. And there's a seniors home just down a little bit farther. So there has been a lot done, but of course, a lot more has to be done, and in view of the strange situations that occurred with COVID and the crazy speculative rise in housing prices, we've got to get back to work and fix this, and that's what we intend to do. It's great to have you all here, and I'm looking forward to the evening.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to start off with our first question. The issue of homelessness in Hamilton is complex, given the interconnection between the range of social policy domains such as income support, healthcare, and housing programs. What approach will you take in utilizing city resources and working with the provincial and federal levels of government to make meaningful headway on the homelessness issue?
Thanks very much. That's an extremely important question, and I think it's really important to acknowledge that we do need to have other players at the table from the other orders of government. It's been frustrating to not see the kind of attention and focus on housing issues that we should have seen, no matter how hard some of us tried to make them a focus. Unfortunately, they weren't. But there are things that we need to do at the City of Hamilton. And I think the first thing that we need to do is make sure that we're all prepared to explore all of the options and ideas on the table. And I know that some of that creativity, much of that creativity, comes from the providers that we have right here in our city. They're the ones, you are the ones, that are coming up with creative solutions and implementing the actual housing units that people need. But there's no doubt that we need to take some action. We know that when it comes to homelessness, 29 people lost their lives, homeless people lost their lives since June of last year. Average age of 38, most often from overdoses. These are things that are absolutely preventable, but we have to have the will to address them. And when we see what happened with the announcement of the Wesley Center closing, that is going to be devastating. We need to understand and recognize that there's a continuum of housing that needs to be dealt with. Everything from making sure that our shelters are actually accessible for people, for all people. Everything from that to supportive housing, transitional housing, supportive housing, low-income housing or subsidized housing, not-for-profit provided, as well as affordable rental and affordable ownership. There's a lot that we can do as a city, fees, programs, grants, but we have to be there when you are reaching out as providers particularly to find the solutions that are going to work for all of us. I want to say also I'm very, very grateful for the work that you've already done. People deserve dignified housing, and they don't have it right now. And we certainly have a lot we can do. So I'm very open-minded, very hard worker, and I've already talked to a number of not-for-profit and private providers as to how we can start solving these problems.
There is no doubt that we need all three levels of government to be cooperating on this particular file. And I think a really good example of that is how all three governments came together to fund our Hamilton LRT project here in Hamilton. And there's a lot of benefits to come out of that. As I mentioned, during the pandemic, it really exposed the the cracks in our system here in this community. And we see that playing out every day on our streets. And not only, as Andrew mentioned, is it impacting individuals who are living on our street, and the HamSmart report that came out today was really stark, but it's also causing so many other issues that we have to grapple with as a community. And so, as I mentioned, I created a plan that will build 50,000 new homes in Hamilton over the next 10 years. And as we announced today, 1,000 of those will be affordable, 1,000 per year will be affordable housing. And that's affordable housing, like what Indwell does, supportive housing, it's shelters as well, transitional housing, and so many others. And as I said, you folks here know the levers that and the opportunities that we have as a community. And so, as I've been listening to you over the course of this campaign, we have embedded those policy proposals and the things that you see on the ground every single day into our proposals. We know that what gets measured gets done, and that's why I put out goals, why I put out numbers. 50,000 is double what we're doing right now, double the current pace. 1,000 affordable units is 4 times what we're doing right now. We're creating only 250 units per year right now. So we got to use all of our available tools, whether it be using city land, whether it be city housing, purchasing properties, and then utilizing the experts that Indwell and other service providers are able to provide in terms of wraparound supports for city housing. I am open to all ideas. And again, the point is that we need action. And we need a mayor who can pull everybody together and then demonstrate that we can work with higher levels of government. So part of the plan today was to announce that we are going to stop spending $500,000 on the enforcement of our encampments. What a waste of money. We know we can find more money, and so I have committed to $1 million to eliminating encampments, and then again the ongoing effort to reduce the affordable housing backlog, and that's going to eventually get us to the point where we're able to find a lot more housing supports and shelters and spaces for the people who are living on our streets right now. And I just want to say that $1 million, it shows to the province and to the federal government that we have skin in the game as well, so that when we go to them, they know that we have a plan and they're going to fund that plan.
So here in the east end of Hamilton, we have the greatest example in living memory of a housing plan that worked. It was designed by Joseph Pigott, the famous Pigott construction Pigott, and it's called the Wartime Houses. And so many of my friends that I went to school with, Ballard and Delta, lived in a wartime house. And those houses, the development community didn't want to build them because they were too cheap and too simple, and they were actually supposed to be temporary. But if you take a little drive down that way, you'll see lots of them. Done over again. My old friend Pat Quinn, his dad bought a wartime house in 1950 for $4,000, dug out the basement because they were just sitting on pads, and then his brother Barry told me that after he dug out the basement, he made a room and rented it out, and they had 4 kids in the house. There are ways of and aggressive ways of addressing the housing problem, and that's what we did then, and I'm not sure why we're not considering it now. But the first obvious thing for building is land. Land values have really skyrocketed. In downtown Hamilton now, land that was $500,000 an acre is almost $10 million an acre. That's how expensive that land is. So you can extrapolate from that how expensive houses built on that land would be, and of course we're not going to build a single family dwelling, King and James, but we do have other land available. And I think it would be a remarkable gesture of the provincial government if they would donate all the land that they bought for the LRT and donate it to affordable housing. Because we don't really need a streetcar to go from Eastgate Square to downtown, but we desperately need that land. It's already been purchased, and we've been promised the LRT, so obviously the funding is available. the province can easily transform that if they wish to do that. So these are some of the things that you have to realize. When we started doing that project, we took out a whole bunch of very inexpensive residential units for people, one right on these corners, because a young man's mother came to me and told me her son had a unit for $600 a month, and it's gone. And you know what units are like at this moment. So the first essential thing is to, once again, lobby the government, tell them what our priority is. What is your priority, Hamilton? Is it housing, or is it something else? And secondly, find the land, make it available for housing providers like Indwell to do their job. And third, have a designated portion of our city administration to expedite housing projects so that they don't sit on the books for months and even years until they get built. We need it done now. Thank you.
This will be to Keenan first, then Bob, then Andrea. And the topic is transitional and supportive housing. So recently, a transitional housing project by Hamilton is Home member lost the opportunity to be awarded millions of dollars in funding from the federal government because the city was not going to commit to the project due to it being transitional housing and not permanent housing. What will you do to ensure that all types of housing, permanent or not, is recognized by the city so not-for-profit organizations are able to assist all of those in need of housing and services?
Yeah, when I hear about this and how necessary that this project would have been, and for it to fall through because our zoning and all of our other policies are so out of date, it's frustrating, and it's exactly something that we need to be addressing, the type of conversation that we need to be having as a community. First of all, we need to waive all development charges for affordable housing and for supportive and transitional housing. There's no doubt about that. If city housing were to have done this project, then it would have been, the development charges would not have been applied, and the economics would have made much more sense. What we need to do as well is update our zoning. The issue is here, as you pointed out, there's been so many land use plans and greenbelt plans and all of that have altered our official plan as a community, and yet our zoning is still stuck in the 50s. And so this next council has to deal with that. That is top of mind for us. And modernizing our zoning is one of the key planks to our platform, so that we can allow, as of right, transitional housing and other similar types of projects to go forward. A really good example of this is the Chateau Plans, an Interval House, was able to set up shop there and create a much needed building in that area of the Chateau Hospital lands because it was already zoned. Well, we need to extend that type of zoning all across the city so that we can be much more flexible. And this isn't just for this type of transitional housing or anything else. This is for the creation of duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes and so many other types of housing types. That's how we're going to get the 50,000 homes built in this community. And so it's homes of all types, because as we build out those 50, you'll have people moving up and down the ladder and benefiting from the fact that we've created far more homes in this community.
If you're going to embark on rezoning, you're going to spend the next 3-4 years of city council life doing that. It's a very long, difficult, complicated process. And what zoning often does is tell you what you can't do. And there was a lady who had a chip wagon at the corner of Ferguson and Barton. And we were rezoning at the time, it'd be around 2006 or 7. And that was rezoned to residential. She couldn't have a chip wagon. And she was really appealing to me, and I did everything I could for her. I said, look, folks, it just lines on a paper. Let the lady have her chip wagon. No, can't have it. She hated me for, I don't know, I did everything I could, but she had to move her chip wagon. Well, guess what? About a week ago, I saw fencing going up around that lot. So from 2007 till now, she could have had a chip wagon there. And what that means is we need to have common sense when we approach things. And if there's a technicality that's holding something up, we had the situation in the Dominic Agostino Recreation Area, where they were going to build seniors housing over top. And then they found out after something like 7 years, well, we can't really do that because it's Board of Education property. And we don't have the money to buy the property. Well, you bought the property. It's the Board of Education property is our property. So how about the board sell it for $1 and let them build the project? So what the city staffers have to do is figure out how to solve the little technical issues rather than saying, the book says that, we can't do that. Honest, I'm not for a whole new zoning regime for the next few years. We've got problems we have to solve right now, and the Indwell folks know exactly what I'm talking about. And there's ways of getting the right people in the right place to maybe leave their office, close that little book, and go and look at the site and say, would this be a good or a bad thing in this location? And that's what we need more of. We need more real action by the people who sit making big six-figure salaries and frankly obstructing rather than doing what they should be, was making those projects work. Thank you.
Thanks very much. It's really an extremely important question, and as we all know, there's a continuum of housing needs, which I referenced a little bit earlier, but there's also a lot of barriers to getting housing built in our community. And when it comes particularly to affordable housing, we have such a great resource in Hamilton is Home, and we need to center the voices of people that know how to get these houses built, these units built, because you're the experts. And that is, for me, a priority. I've always been somebody who understands that people on the front lines doing the work know what the problems are, but they also know what the opportunities are. And so starting at that place, where it's a collaboration with the folks that are already successfully doing some of the work that is celebrated these days in our community, realizing though that the City Council has opportunities, and I know later we're talking about things like inclusionary zoning and exclusionary zoning, and so I'm looking forward to having those conversations. But we have a 10-year housing plan. It's a great plan, I guess, in theory, but where are the tactics that are going to be needed to actually see the results of that plan? Where are the specifics that we need to implement to actually realize the goals that are set out in the housing plan? So that plan needs to be overhauled, it needs to be renewed, but it also needs to have attached to it real solutions that we can start working on. That's one of the things that I find very frustrating. Theoretically, it's great, but where are the specifics, right? Where are the nitty-gritty plans? They don't exist, and so that has to be job number one. And some of those include some of the things that Keenan was talking about. I've heard the exact same story around inability to get the other orders of government to the table to provide some of these housing solutions that are pretty much ready to go because the City of Hamilton is not there as a partner. That's not acceptable. We need to be there as a partner. We need to recognize that as a city, we have a role to play, and the other players are not going to come to the table if we don't put our hat in the ring first, because it's our city, and it's our residents, and it's our necessity to make sure that people have a place that they can call home. So as I said earlier, these are all things I'm very passionate about, and I know that there are everybody in this room is passionate about these things because that's why we're here tonight. But I can guarantee you that there isn't a quick fix per se, but there's a quick commitment from me to actually start doing the work to bring a focus on housing. If housing is our number one priority in Hamilton, and it is, then it needs to be the number one priority of council, and it will be for me. And one of the things that I have in my plan is to look at the way we process these applications in the first place. So if we have the city at the table and we're moving forward with some of these plans, they get stuck in the approvals process. It takes years and years and years to build anything. That's just not acceptable. So my plan talks about really focusing in on a change in the way that we process these applications, process the approvals, deal with the zoning, with housing, affordability particularly, but housing overall as the number one priority. We are short on staff for sure, but if our priority is housing, that's where you have to actually show that in the way that you structure the process. So it's making sure that there's a team of people that are focused on that. We also know there's affordability, as the question speaks to, in terms of home ownership. And so let's make sure that we're dealing with the approvals process in a way that moves things along. We have a staffing issue, as I already mentioned, but we can provide digital solutions to some of the processing. That's happening in other jurisdictions. We should be able to see much more transparency in where applications are as they go through the process. And I'm suggesting, because one of the things I've heard from not-for-profit providers as well as private sector providers, or private profit providers, is that at any point in time, somebody else is responsible for the file, but nobody was told that the file had moved to another person in terms of responsibility. That's just ridiculous. And so let's put in place a system whereby there is somebody responsible for the file, so that at any time that there's a glitch or a problem, that can be addressed. You know who to go to move the file along. When it comes to the process, it is absolutely it's glacial in terms of how long it takes, and yet we are desperate for housing of all kinds. We have to really fix this, and we have a chance to do that with a mayor that's very, very passionate about housing issues, and a community of not-for-profit and private developers that really want to bring the solutions forward. For goodness sakes, let's just get it done. It's something that is absolutely a priority for all of us, and I believe we can. I firmly believe that we can get it done. It's going to take work and focus and prioritization, but it is the number one issue. You cannot build a life without an affordable, secure place that meets your needs and that you can call home.
Staffing and streamlining processes are absolutely things that we need to address, and I've been working on that with the city for the last 10 years as the voice of business, because what the Hamilton is Home the coalition is experiencing is exactly what businesses of all kinds are experiencing throughout this community. Now, development charges are important when it comes to private sector development, because that is what pays for a lot of our amenities and parkland and community centers and all of that. But when it comes to affordable housing projects, it becomes a huge hindrance. In fact, in some cases, it prevents them from going forward. And when you have City Housing Hamilton able to not pay development charges, and yet our Hamilton is Home coalition folks actually delivering not-for-profit and affordable housing much better than the city is doing, we need to make sure that they are treated the same as City Housing is treated. And so that's why I think it's really important to waive development charges when it comes to those types of developments. I talked about zoning before. Just because it's hard doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing it. I guess that's what people have been saying for decades now, and why we're stuck with zoning that is in the 50s. We need to address that, even if it is hard. Or maybe it's because it's hard. We need to be doing that. Because what's happening is so many of these projects, and again, not just not-for-profit, but for-profit as well, are paying thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars up front just to get minor variances because our zoning is completely out of date. So that's another major impediment to these projects. And when you rezone and update our zoning, now you're able to, again, accommodate the duplexes, triplexes, et cetera, all the various housing types. And I think a really important part of our plan is the incentivization of secondary suites. So it democratizes the affordable housing that is provided throughout this community. It spreads it out throughout the community. It allows the homeowner that is struggling to carry an $800,000 mortgage in Binbrook to provide an affordable place for the woman who works at Tim Hortons in Binbrook and who wants to live and work in the same community. So there are so many things that we need to be addressing, obviously, and it does need to be absolutely a priority for the next mayor. And I promise I will appoint somebody within the mayor's office and also appoint a housing czar in City Hall to help shepherd through each and every single one of these impediments to the future growth of affordable housing in Hamilton.
Next question is on inclusionary and exclusionary zoning, and Andrea, you will be going first. The City of Hamilton is currently undergoing a feasibility study on inclusionary zoning around protected major transit station areas, with a report slated to go to Council in Q2 of next year. Council's Planning Committee also recently approved a plan which has the intent of having inclusionary zoning along the LRT route. So this is a two-part question. Do you support inclusionary zoning along the LRT route or elsewhere? And if so, how do you plan to work with all stakeholders involved, so that being the city, developers, and not-for-profit housing providers, to make it a reality? And second, should Hamilton eliminate exclusionary zoning?
So first of all, absolutely, we need to see inclusionary zoning along the LRT line. We already see units that are being built along that project's trajectory, and there's nothing in place. So that's a bit problematic. We definitely do need to fix that and get moving on a policy so that every unit that gets built along that line is including some inclusionary zoning units. And how do you do that? Exactly how you described. You pull the stakeholders together, you do that work collaboratively, and you come out with a result when it comes to inclusionary zoning and the formula that not only everybody can get behind, but that actually provides the affordable units, and that's the most important piece. On the second part of the question, the exclusionary zoning, the biggest travesty of the last year was when the advisory group, the task force that the provincial government put together, that brought forward exclusionary zoning as their very top recommendation on how to get housing built in Ontario. And the government said no, they didn't take that up, even though that was the top recommendation. Exclusionary zoning has to go. If we get rid of exclusionary zoning, that missing middle housing will be able to be built. We'll be able to see the duplexes, the triplexes, the small 4-unit buildings being built in communities around the city. That's how we increase the density, and that's how we manage the growth, but it's also how we get prices down. We're providing more stock, we're providing more access to housing because we're allowing that housing to be built. And you know, I guess we're talking about NIMBYism later, right? Okay, I got something to say about that too. But the point is this: we have to make sure that we are very firm on inclusionary zoning, but we also have to make sure that we deal with the exclusionary zoning here in Hamilton, because it gives us the chance to deal with the very problems that Keenan was talking about in terms of old zoning laws. There's a good way to fix it, and guess what? It's pretty darn fast. It's called exclusionary zoning, getting rid of exclusionary zoning. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
You're giving me my answers, Andrea. Exactly. We need to modernize our zoning, and that's the way to be able to get rid of exclusionary zoning because they haven't kept up, and they don't reflect our modern realities. When it comes to inclusionary zoning, yes, I support inclusionary zoning. I'm really interested in seeing the proposal that comes forward with City Hall. Let's not forget that the federal government's support of the LRT was predicated on the creation of affordable housing. So inclusionary zoning is very important. The federal government, unfortunately, has not been engaged as to what that looks like. But we know that the federal government is creating funds and has a bunch of tools that they're trying to create that will activate the creation of affordable housing in projects like along the LRT line. I think it's really important, however, that we not set a number that is so crazy that it makes the economics of development along the LRT line unfeasible. So I think it's really important that it not be set at a level, again, that makes it a poison pill so that we can't go forward with this LRT project. It's very important. The LRT is important on so many levels, and let's not forget that it's not just about creating affordable housing, it's about creating housing in corridors that allow us to intensify and build the 50,000 homes over the next 10 years that I am targeting to build. And as well, it's about infrastructure, underground infrastructure in particular. And we know how important that is to the further development of this city as well. So I definitely support inclusionary zoning. I want to work with the private sector developers here in town. I've talked to them about this, about how they need to come to the table and help us deal with the affordability problem here in Hamilton. Our for-profit developers are doing quite well. And they will continue to do quite well, particularly under my ambitious plan. And so I've invited them to the table so that they can earn the social license that they need to earn to be able to continue to do what they're doing in this community.
So the LRT project, as outlined, would tend to drive prices up along the line. There's no question about that, and that's why there's a lot of excitement, of course, in the development community, the opportunity to make a lot of money with this project. The federal government's add-on, which was really, I have to say, somewhat lame. Oh, and we're going to have affordable, as Mr. Loomis mentioned, there was no real detail behind that, and I still haven't seen any real detail behind that. So if we are going to go through a very invasive project for the city, that a number of inclusionary units, I would say should be a big number. It should be something in the order of, and I think it should be 30%. Because there's going to be a lot of activity along the line for many, many years, and there's going to be prices to pay, jobs will be lost, businesses will move out until the whole thing is said and done. And so what we should end up with is what we're all here tonight about, is that an adequate supply of affordable housing that's related to those high costs that are going to be imposed on the city. So I'm going to say it should be a 30% number. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to the next question, and this is centered around home ownership and market rentals. And we'll start with you, Keenan, and then we're moving to Bob, and then back to Andrea.
Okay, thank you, Tricia.
I'm going to read the question.
Oh,
Sorry,
yeah,
sorry about
great.
that. Okay. Home ownership among young people is on the decline. The average home price in Hamilton as of July was over $860,000, which required a household income of around $160,000 for a family to afford that house, plus a 20% down payment. This is more than double the median household income in Hamilton right now. Hamilton cannot grow as a city if we cannot retain young people. What steps will you take to help keep young people in the city and give them the same opportunities their parents had through home ownership?
Yeah, as a father of three, raising kids in this community, I joke that part of the reason why I want to build 50,000 new homes in Hamilton over the next 10 years is because I want my kids to eventually be able to move out of my house. What parent here isn't faced with that situation? How are our kids going to be able to afford their own home? This is exactly the issue and exactly the reason why we need to address this with supply. Supply is one of the biggest drivers, if not the biggest driver, of affordability in this community and throughout the GTHA as well. And that's why we have set the ambitious target of building 50,000 homes in this community over the next 10 years, doubling what we're doing. If we clear out all the red tape and all the other things that we're doing, we're going to be able to achieve that. If we actually shoot for that goal and measure it and hold ourselves accountable to it, we're going to be able to meet that goal. I talked about in-law suites. I think that's a really important part of this. I think that a number of in-law suites across the community can be created by incentivizing, by not just making it easy for people to do so, not just pre-zoning for people to do so, but by actually facilitating it, by incentivizing it, and by being, as a city, open to this and say, so, you want to create an in-law suite. Here are the steps that you need to go through to be able to do that. I talked about LRT and that LRT corridor, but we need to be building along our 5 blast transit corridors as well. So it's not just about one, it's about 5 different transit lines. The A line is the next transit line. We need to be planning for that while we build the B line LRT. We know how long these transit plans come together. And so we need to be ready for when B-Line LRT is done, and then ready for the next project and the next project after that. And that's how you build out 5 lines over 25 years, and creating these corridors where you have the opportunity for density. So a lot of things that we need to address when it comes to the building of homes. But I also want to talk about jobs, because that's going to be one of the most important things that we do, is make sure that we are an economically resilient and vibrant community. And we have incredible industries right now. Manufacturing is, that's our identity. And it's important that we maintain that, and we go green in terms of how we make steel in this community, and thus create clean tech opportunities and a hydrogen hub here in Hamilton that we can then export those technologies. But it's also about maximizing our opportunities in life sciences, which are great paying jobs, the types of jobs that you will be able to afford a home with. Creative industries, focusing on the employment lands that we have that are underutilized in this community, along the waterfront, downtown, in our business parks, at McMaster Innovation Park as well. And so we've talked about how we have bottlenecks in City Hall. We also have bottlenecks in economic development. And so I'm dedicating $1 million to increasing the Economic Development Department fund. They got $1 million about 10 years ago. That increase, that has not increased over time, and we were celebrating $1 billion per year in permits. Now we're celebrating $2 billion perhaps this year in permitting, and yet they don't have the extra capacity to be able to deal with that. So not only is it about housing supply, it's about good paying jobs in this community as well. And I think in the end, we'll be able to get there. And I feel much more happy about my kids' prospects in this community if we can meet all of those goals.
So, all of us have had this on our mind. What happened with these housing prices? My $150,000 house, identical one across the street, was bought for $750,000. And we've all seen that. Why is that? And can we fix it? And no, we probably can't fix it, because there are other things at work, other forces, you might say, of evil at work that drive those prices up. But one of the things you'll notice, you walk around a neighborhood, we met with a lot of people today with planting signs and saying hello to neighbors. Those signs on a telephone pole that say, "We buy houses," call it. What do you mean, we buy houses? I buy a house because I need to live in a house. And I remember my time at City Hall when we were going after slum landlords. There was one guy in Toronto who, I think he had 60 properties. And I think there's a speculative bubble going on that may eventually collapse, because it collapsed in the tulip bubble in Holland back in the 17th century. This just gets crazy. It's like the house becomes like a stock rather than a place that you live in and has a certain value. So I would be glad to sell my house to a nice family that for a reasonable amount of money. But once it's posted and then the bids come in, they can drive up the bids. You never know where that price is going to end up. So I think one of the things that we have to address is absentee landlords and people buying up housing stock just for the point of driving it upward. I'm not so sure exactly how we're going to do that, but the issues that we're concerned about, it's really almost impossible for the city to fix, except for doing the things that we need to do, such as increase the supply of housing. We have to build more houses, we know that, and we've talked about all of the different strategies that we're going to try to employ to make that happen. But this other thing with these crazy prices, my little house on 39 Regina North, I met the guy who bought it. Bought a house in the East End. What street? Regina. What number? 39. How much you pay for it? And it was a lot of money. So that can't be. All of our houses are worth something. I can remember when I was mad because houses were so cheap. This is ridiculous. How can a house in Hamilton be $80,000? It's a good house. It's got a backyard. It's got character in the neighborhood. And then it went the other way. So anybody who can fix that tomorrow is a genius. But what we can do is find out the reasons, such as speculative absentee landlords driving up prices, and go from there. And increase the housing supply. That's for sure. We all agree with that. Thank you.
So absolutely, we've talked already about how do we increase some of the affordable stock, how do we get some housing built quickly. We've talked about the exclusionary zoning piece, we've talked about the inclusionary zoning piece. All of those things are important. I don't disagree with Keenan. In fact, the other side of the equation is making sure that young people have decent jobs here that pay the bills. And that is a huge issue for us. We know that we've seen a lot of good jobs leave over the years, but I think the city's done a pretty good job in diversifying the economy. We have to keep doing that. As Keenan said, and again, it's something that's obvious when we see what's happening in terms of the possibilities down in the Slate asset management lands that were the former Stelco lands. Great opportunities for jobs, but not just jobs, good green jobs. When I was over there not too long ago, they were saying around 6,000 people would be working on that site when it was built out. And I asked them, what other community has done this? They gave me an example, about 4 times the size in terms of acreage. And in that situation, they had 20,000 jobs within 10 years. That is a very exciting project. We have McMaster Innovation Park, absolutely. So all kinds of opportunity in tech and in biotech. We know that MAC is doing work on pandemic response and vaccines and those kinds of things. MAC and Mohawk are great assets for us. So the jobs piece is really important. We also have an amazing city when it comes to film, the film industry, when it comes to cultural industries. I think we can do a lot better when it comes to our theaters and the music industry. All of those things are things that I want to explore and that are in my plan. But you know, we have a bit of a vicious circle happening for young people. The rents are so expensive for young people. I've talked to young people who figure they got a good job, they got a pretty good job. They're making 60 grand a year. Pretty good job, right? Well, it doesn't pay the bills. When your rent is, say, $2,400 a month, it doesn't go very far, that 60 grand. So we really have a problem with the rental costs going up, and we are also not protecting our rental stock. So on top of all of the other things we need to do, our affordable rental stock needs to be protected as well. Now, we saw a significant loss of some of that rental stock with the buying up of the properties by Metrolinx. So that gives us even more of an imperative to make sure that when we build that line, that we are bringing back affordable housing. And we've talked about that a little bit. But I think there are just so many pieces that we need to put in place so that people like me can say to my son, finally, see ya, good luck, away you go. But also to give the young people hope. Because right now, it's really sad when you talk to young people and they feel like there's just no way out. They have given up hope. I've even talked to young people who have told me that they've decided that they're not going to start a family because they don't think they're going to ever be able to afford to have a family. How can it be that that's the case? So we have to fix it, and I think there are many pieces where we can have influence on changing the future so that our young people have hope again, are excited about our city, stay here, and can live in the community that they love.
So we're going to, is this still on? There we go. So we're going to move on to a topic that isn't often discussed, but it is certainly a huge underlying issue for a lot of our organizations, NIMBYism. So, NIMBY stands for Not in My Backyard. It's the idea that a new development, whatever format may take, does not belong in that neighborhood. All Hamilton is Home members have or are currently facing issues of NIMBYism despite the good work that the members do. NIMBYism comes in all forms, from worrying about neighborhood character to it's too big for this area, to arguing a building should be preserved as heritage, to simply not liking the organization or company that is looking to build there. In July, a Main Street poll showed that affordable housing was a top priority for Hamilton residents, with 80% of respondents agreeing that housing is too expensive. That same poll, however, showed that 74% of respondents agreed that or they thought that their neighborhoods already had enough housing. So herein lies the problem. How do you build new housing units if 3/4 of the city thinks they already have enough housing units in their neighborhood? Should you be elected mayor, you will inevitably be faced with many scenarios where local residents and possibly even councillors are against proposed new development. What steps will you take to deal with NIMBYism and meet the needs of our growing city by getting more housing built? Bob, you are starting, and then Andrew, then Keenan.
Yeah, if you drive down Bay Street, where Bayfront Park, where you go in on the roadway, just a little past there on the right-hand side is a sixplex with an arched driveway, and you go in, and when that came to the planning committee, the neighbors had 120 names on a petition saying they don't want that there. And typically what you do when you're a council, you say, I support it, but I don't want to go against the neighbors, so I'll vote against it, but you guys vote for it, okay? You know, and you make this little click deal in the back, and then I stood up in the planning committee and said, I'm in favor of this, and I think it should go forward. And it did, and it's beautiful, and there's no real negative impact. So it takes a couple of things. It takes real knowledge of the neighborhoods that we live in to know and understand whether a certain type of development would be good, would be neutral, or might not be good at all. When Indwell was going across the street here, I was during the 2010 election, and I knocked on number 3 right across the neighbor across the street, and he said, oh, I'm worried that place across the street. I said, you know what, you're lucky they're going in, Indwell's putting it there, because they do a great job. And that's going to actually be an asset to the neighborhood. And for all I know, your house value is going to go up. What it takes is a certain amount of guts. And guts and knowledge. Because the knowledge part comes in when 50 Murray Street was Mission Services. And we were going to put in the new West Harbor GO station. And Pastor Ed, we had a long talk about that, about what they wanted to do with that building. And I said, why don't you sell it? Get the value out of that building, and then we'll find another place that would be even better. And that's exactly what happened. They sold 50 Murray Street for $700,000, and they bought the old Hamilton Mohawk College building on Wentworth Street North. Much bigger, much better, much, you know, still serving the neighborhood it needed to serve. And they netted $300,000, and that was a great deal. So it takes knowledge of the neighborhood, it takes guts, and it takes you, as elected officials, to go out and talk to your neighbors about what they're doing, why they're doing it. And when you've got a developer like Indwell, you've got no problem supporting what they're doing because they do it right. Thank you.
One of the things I find very frustrating is when it comes to maybe a taller building, maybe a 4-story or 3-story building that might be proposed in a neighborhood that really doesn't have a lot of that, nobody wants it. But if it's a McMansion going up, well, that's okay, because it's a McMansion. And yet, the amount of space that it would take up would be very, very similar. The height would probably be very, very similar. We really have to get serious about acknowledging that all of our neighborhoods need to have a big mix of housing, a mix of all kinds of sorts of housing. So one of the things that's going to help us facilitate that, absolutely, is going to be getting rid of the exclusionary zoning. But one of the things that I learned as a person that represented the downtown is that engagement is important. Engagement and information for people is important. And I want to say congratulations to some of the councillors in the room tonight, because they've taken on these issues and they've provided space for vulnerable people in the wards they represent, because they know it's the right thing to do, and they've taken the time to educate and inform and engage community. At the end of the day, not everybody's going to agree, but at least people will feel that they have been heard. I can remember when there was an organization wanting to expand in the Durand neighborhood. Well, I don't know if you folks know where the Durand neighborhood is, but it's a fairly high income neighborhood, south end of Hamilton, just west of downtown. It was controversial. Let's just put it that way. It was controversial. So what we did is we got the neighborhood association together, and we went through the details, and we brought the provider into the conversation. They knew what was going on, and that they could get behind the project. The project went forward. It didn't go to the OMB. It didn't get to a controversial, vitriolic debate at council or at the planning committee or anything else. It's not Pollyanna to think those conversations can't happen. I've seen them happen. And it's the very least we need to do. But at the end of the day, if people aren't on board, we still need to move forward on these projects. And as they become more and more part of our urban fabric, then they will be more and more accepted. It's sometimes hard at the beginning, but the result that you get when you really persevere and you do it in a way that's respectful and inclusive, you'll get a good result. I firmly believe that. And again, I see that there are people that are representatives that are on council now that already do that work, and I laud them for it.
So we'll layer on top of that the fact that we as a community have determined that we're going to do all of our future growth, 80% of our future growth within the current urban boundary, right? And so you can't have that and keep projects from happening within your own community, on your own street. And I have unapologetically run on a YIMBY platform, because I am willing to have that difficult conversation with the community at this point in time. We know that the province is forcing us to plan to be that city of 800,000 people by 2050, which means we're going to have to build another 100,000 units in this community over the next 25 years. And like I said, 80% of that is going to be within somebody's neighborhood. This is where modernizing the zoning would be very helpful, so we don't have to go for approvals in every single small variance and medium-sized variance as well. And so that's going to be big. But engagement is really important. I've always found, and I've been an unapologetic supporter of the LRT project in this community from when I first started with the Chamber of Commerce. And it wasn't something that I was full-throated at that point in time, because I didn't know exactly what my members felt about the LRT. We had just come off the casino debate. It was like 40% were in favor of that, 40% were against, and I felt like LRT was similar to that. But we started to have conversations with folks about why the LRT was important. And it's not just about a transit solution. It's about underground infrastructure. It's about unlocking development and all of that. It's about allowing us to achieve greater population in this community. And what I found is that there was no business that would push back against those types of arguments. And so that's what's really important as we go out and we engage people throughout the community. And so I have undertaken a town hall tour of Hamilton in the lead up to the election, because one of my promises is that I will conduct a town hall in every single ward across the city in my first year in conjunction with that ward councillor. And part of it is because the folks in a lot of wards, especially in the outlying communities, do not feel connected to or heard by their community. But the other thing is that we need to go and have difficult conversations with them. We need to tell them that this is important, that some gentle density in Ancaster, some gentle density in Stoney Creek is how we're going to keep our property tax increases down as low as possible. It's how we're going to dig out of our infrastructure deficit. And it's how we're going to create spaces for our kids as they look to move out of the house, and places for us as we look to age in place in this community. And I have found that when you're able to engage with people on that level and with respect, that they come around. And that's exactly what we need in this community. We need a mayor who's willing to have these difficult conversations, these hard truths, and really connect with people to get them to understand why it's important that they accept a little bit more density within their communities.
Thank you. Moving on to our...
Thank you. We're moving on to our last question, and it's around measuring success. I'm going to start with Andrea, then to Keenan, and then over to Bob. In 4 years, when you're seeking re-election, how should we look back at your term as mayor and measure your success in everything that you've spoken about this evening?
I think that the way to measure success in terms of the commitments made by a mayor on the campaign trail is to look at what has been achieved at the end of that term. When I first started on city council, I set some goals around affordable housing, and we were able to actually have the City Housing Hamilton organization build affordable housing right downtown when I was the chair of that board, and I very much was proud of that. When I was a leader of a political party, I set some goals about making sure that we had equity and diversity reflected in the party that we were. And I was able to bring 50% women in 2014, 2018, and in 2022, over 60% women were elected to the NDP caucus. We had the first Black caucus ever. It's a goal I set, and we got it done. We had the very first First Nations person elected to the Ontario legislature who asked me to help him to be able to afford to run a campaign in the far north. I was committed to that. He agreed to do it, and he became the first First Nations person to be elected at the Ontario legislature. So my point being this, we've talked about a lot of things today. I've got a lot of experience, but a lot of passion, particularly around housing. It's something that I have always had as part of the work that I've done in my entire life, political and not political. Being able to measure success is to be able to look at, do we have housing built? Do we have changes in our processes at City Hall that have made a difference and have gotten housing development in place? Do we have more people off the streets with some supports to stay housed? Do we have a shelter system that actually provides the kind of a resource that all people who are homeless or unhoused are able to access? These are some of the things that are extremely important to me, and I know they're important to you as well. The best way to measure them is at the end of a 4-year term to see what the change is. And I can guarantee you that I will be working day and night with all of you in collaboration with community, with council, with staff to really attack, tackle, and get results on the biggest priority for our city, and that is housing.
This is why you set targets. Actual numbers that you are going to be held accountable to. Obviously, there is a bit of a risk in doing so, right? But I don't want to shirk the responsibilities of being mayor. And I know how important it is that we meet these goals. It's why we've set these goals. This community needs us to be working toward these goals. So, are we on our way to building 50,000 new homes in Hamilton over the next 10 years? That's pretty easy. I'll have those numbers to be running for re-election on. Have we gotten to the point where we're creating 1,000 affordable housing units and supportive housing units each year? Are we on our pace to create 5,000 new jobs in Hamilton over the next term of council as well? So it's really important that we worked towards that. Have we actually moved the needle on rentals, the rental price of the average rental in this community? And have we gotten to the point, we're not going to solve homelessness, but I want to get to the point where there are absolutely no encampments in this community. And I think that's really important that we shoot for that as a goal for this community. And so I'm asking all of you, help me with that. And I know these are the people here in this room that can do that. And I appreciate that. I'm asking you to come on board in doing that, because it's imperative that we get folks off of our streets and into dignified housing and with the supports that they need to be dignified members of our community. Thank you for being here tonight.
So what's the end of 4 years going to be like? That's a really good question. I go back to my previous 4 years. And when I left the mayoralty in 2014, I thought the city was in great shape, and I thought it was time now for a new mayor to come along and carry it on. I'm back again because I have to tell you, I'm a little bit ashamed of when you put the news on every night, there's some story about the Shadow Creek or all these Red Hill inquiry, all this stuff. The city, the way it's being administered is not proper. In the 4 years that I was the mayor, I got the stadium built, I got the West Harbor GO Station built, I got we concluded the Randall Reef project. We got McMaster University downtown with that great $80 million building that's there now. We got the McNabb bus terminal, which is operating very efficiently now, instead of having all the buses that used to be parked by Gore Park, just idling away all night. And the rest of it, the tax were kept low. That there might have been a negative payback to that, but we did keep the taxes down to 1.3% over those 4 years. So I was happy to leave, and I'm not happy to quit yet because it's broken. It has to be fixed. And the other thing that I can tell you is that the folks who helped create this building, all along in my council time and my time as mayoralty, I was involved at some level at some point with these folks to get these projects done, and I was very proud of that. Some things are minor, some things are major, but even as a member of parliament, I made sure that Indwell was relieved of a very costly situation thanks to the federal government, but we fixed that. So, I'm not going to predict the future, but I'm going to tell you I'm going to keep on doing what I have been doing, and that's getting things done. Thank you.
So with that, we want to thank all the candidates for being here this evening. I know you have very busy schedules. Election is only a few weeks away, so make sure to vote October 24th. We're not going to solve this problem.
Advance poll this weekend.
Advance poll this weekend as well, yeah.
And next weekend.
And next weekend. Just go vote. Just look it up and vote. This is not an issue we're going to solve overnight. It's going to take a collective effort. The Hamilton is Home Coalition is an excellent example of that. Having the right mindset in the mayor's office is also going to help quite a bit. So we do appreciate taking the time to be here tonight. I also do want to do a quick shout out to, I know there are a bunch of ward candidates here tonight as well, and some councillors, current councillors as well. So thank you for taking the time out of your campaign schedules to be here and listen. It's greatly appreciated. And for this event tonight, obviously thank you Indwell for hosting, but there was a committee of people that put this together. So really quick thank you to Teresa Howe, Sean Ferris, Lori Ann Gagne, Renee Wetzler, Sarah Board, Jeff Wilson, Catherine Fair, and Natalie Morgan. So with that, thank you very much everybody. We still have, it's not quite 8 o'clock yet, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is great. We're efficient. And great reason to partner with us. So with that, get home safe, and thank you very much for coming.